Welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, we interview Dr. Austin Schoen, performance therapist, on his work with female combat athletes. You will definitely want to listen to this because we're going to talk about everything from training and the nutrition, but more importantly, the mindset around being an athlete. So if you're ready, listen up and lean in as we elevate your mind.
Woohoo! I'm going to give a little intro that he sent us, though, because it's full of shit and information. And
like good stuff, you guys.
Yeah,
all the good stuff.
Stay on the podcast.
So he, originally from the Chicago suburbs, Austin grew up with a passion for athletics, specifically wrestling. It was that passion, that wrestling, that propelled him to the University of Wisconsin, where he studied exercise and sports science, as well as competed on the wrestling team. Upon completing his third year at UWL, he was offered early admission into the Doctorate program of Chiropractic Medicine and Masters in Sports Medicine. Double whammy there. He was head of his school's branch of Motion Palpation Institute and has taken multiple DNS, Neuromuscular Stabilization. Oh, we've done that. That's what you do with me. Courses. Yes. Yeah. He has also become qualified in dynamic cupping, dry needling, IASTM, neurodynamics, and soft tissue mobilization. So he is working to bridge the gap between strength conditioning and manual medicine by combining all three qualities into performance care. He's able to help athletes from UFC, PFL, NFL, NHL, and PGA. Locally, he owns the Warrior Sports Wellness that focuses on providing high quality performance care to high performers in life. But he also owns an online training and education company called Building a Fighter, which consists of providing remote performance care for combat sports athletes all over the world. It also has online education offerings to help performance providers integrate and understand working with combat athletes of all skill levels. Did we get it all?
You crushed. You absolutely crushed that.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
we practice. We talk a lot, so
No,
we crush it.
And Amanda, I appreciate the intro.
Yes. Okay. So I know you because your girlfriend, or your wife, I should say more formally, is my bodywork lady. And then she referred me to you for some other stuff that you do. And so you and I worked together, and then I saw your gym and I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. But then what I wanted to do is have you on today because you work specifically with athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our women here, they have an athlete mindset, and I want them to realize some of the struggles that you hear from these athletes that you work for in the NFL, the combat sports and all that are similar struggles that the women we work with on a day-to-day. So I want you to tell the audience, like, what achievements do you have with these female athletes? How do you tailor your approach with the female athletes? Give us a little bit of a get-go on that.
Oh, I got you. So when I'm working with any combat sports athlete, right, the main focus is to develop a personalized plan that includes both the strength and conditioning aspect and what they need to get to where they want to be, as well as the manual therapy and the healthcare side of how do we do that as safe as possible. And when I'm working with female athletes in particular, while I would be the first one to say I'm not as good as I should be about asking the big questions first, right? I'm not always the one that's going to be like, hey, when's your period? What's your cycle? All this stuff. But it's more or less because I've started to, the way I work with people in person is I get them as comfortable with me as possible. And within a few sessions, I typically kind of know because they tell me. Right. So it's not necessarily on my intakes, but it's more or less as soon as I get somebody comfortable enough with me, then I know where they're at as far as their cycle goes. I know, like, hey, if they're feeling like shit in one of their sessions, I'll ask point blank. I'm like, hey, like, what's the cycle looking like? Are we at what point of the month are we at? And lo and behold, if we're in a high volume session and it's also lining up with when they're hitting a lot of their symptomatic parts of their period, well, guess what? That's when we need to actually take a step back. I'm going to erase because my strength and conditioning, we always joke like it's wrote in pencil, not pen. And I'll erase what we have, decrease some of the volume, and then give them a little bit more of a deload if we need to. And then on top of that, like, what are my accolades and everything? So I've worked with female fighters at basically every level, from Olympic wrestlers to UFC top 10 female athletes, to judo, Olympic judo, to really just even like local high school wrestlers that are elite at what they do. So I kind of run the gamut of combat sports from both the male and female side.
Interesting. Do you find that women are reluctant to talk to you about their cycle, or most of the time they want to because of it does include an aspect of training that you have to consider?
So that is actually why I don't start talking about it right away. I want them to be as comfortable as possible with me.
Yeah.
And then I've found that it just kind of comes out naturally. But as soon as they feel more comfortable with me, that's when we can really dive into the nitty gritty of where are they at? What do we need to do? What does a normal period look like to them? Because some people get hit with more symptoms, right? And stress is stress is stress. And if they're going through a highly symptomatic, stressful period, well, then we need to take away some of the physical stressors.
Right. I'm interested in that mindset before, because maybe you're their first coach who's addressed this, especially a male coach, and kind of the mindset of, I'm an athlete, I should push through this time where I'm feeling like shit. And I'm curious to their response once you start creating. I love the idea of like pencil, not pen, like, so, like we can pull back, we can deload, we can, cut volume, whatever that looks like how does that impact even just their mindset around training and their bodies and listening to their bodies?
That's the number one thing that I have to like get them comfortable with in taking a step back. Right. And I will caveat that with, if we're in camp, if we have a name on the line, we have a set date that we need to be able to get into the cage, then to be completely honest, high performance isn't always healthy. And there's a difference between training for the performance side or training for the longevity side. If high performance isn't always healthy, and I need to get them to, because a lot of people don't realize MMA, right? You weigh in, you make your weight, you get half your paycheck. You only get the other half if you win. And depending on the person, like it could be $12,000, it could be $100,000. Well, I would bet, and I know that they'll say that depending upon who they are, but 99.9% of combat athletes, they want the extra paycheck, and they'll do what it takes. Right. That being said, when we're out of camp, this is when I start to get them comfortable with taking the days off, being able to deload, being able to feel what your body feels and adjust and accommodate based off of those symptoms. And a lot of it comes from just proper education. A lot of it comes from having a one-on-one conversation and getting it. That's a cool part about what I do, is I can get people out of the gym and into the clinic and put them in my actual treatment room. And that's where we can talk behind closed doors, one-on-one, and be like, hey, this is why I needed to have you take a step back. This is why it's good for your health to be able to step back, relax, and take away some of the physical stressors, because all these other things are happening in your system. And in order for you to get to the next level, we need to understand that concept. But because of the way combat sports is, because of the way that the entire culture is around wrestling, jiu-jitsu, MMA, they're grinders. That's what they do. And that's what they do well. That's what got them to the specific level they got to. It's only going from good to great where people have to realize that working harder isn't always working smarter.
I love that you said that, because when we're making this, or creating a mirror to our clientele, they are also grinders, but they're grinders in their careers and their achievement. And for you to be able to say, look, I work with some of the athletes who, these sports that you work in are so physically exhausting, and still teaching them to take time off. Whereas our clients will be like, no, I got to keep going, more, do more, do more. And we very much both come from the concept of like, more is more. And when you have all these other stressors on top of that, like it's going to catch up with you. So I want our listeners to hear that. MMA, women who literally have to go round over round getting the shit kicked out of each other, take days off.
100%. Well, I always say this one saying, and it's like, look, if more and better were the same, they'd be the same word. We wouldn't need two words, right?
Awesome.
More isn't always better, and better isn't always more.
I know. Pop off.
We love that.
Yeah. So and that's what I've found gets them to at least comprehend what I'm saying. That's the cue that I use to get them to understand, like, oh, they are two separate things. They aren't necessarily one and the same.
So when you're managing their training schedule, how advanced are you planning it, or is it like a week by week thing? Because what I'm trying to figure out is, so we've got this gal, maybe she's hitting her period, and so her training's going to shit. Like, did you prepare for that? We're having that conversation with her ahead of time so she knows, like, okay, this week I might be doing this, or like, how does that work as far as longevity of a training program with you, and like what movements do you incorporate when they are training and then when they're in their deload weeks?
So really what I do with my deload is I will add in more breathing. Amanda, very big on breathing.
Yes.
And more or less it pulls you out of that fight or flight state and allows you to get into more of into a more relaxed state. Right. So that's one of the main things I'll do. The second main thing I'll do is I'll decrease my volume. Because most of the time, the overtraining, the physical stimulus, it's not necessarily, at least from a combat athlete's perspective, because of the intensity. It's because of the volume of the training that we're doing. So those are my two main ways that I would affect my deload. And I know I'm kind of working backwards off of what you told me. How I plan and what do I specifically do when it comes to training programs is I try to make a minimum of a 4-month, really it's a macro, but like mesocycle, right? It all depends on the athlete in front of me. And if that athlete has expressed that they have an extremely symptomatic period, so to say, or extremely symptomatic cycle. If they know it hits them really hard, then I 1000% am going to program in deloads based around where we're at through the cycle, right? If, say, they're on, and granted, I know hormonally that things still change, but if they're on an IUD and they aren't getting their period right now and they don't feel a whole lot of symptoms around it, then necessarily I'm not going to make as big of a change because they're not feeling the same symptomatic, not symptomatic uptick. So that's kind of where I'll lay out that macro.
Yeah. I know we're talking a lot about periods, but I'm going to keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
I was a college cheerleader. Yep. I've been a dancer since I was 3 years old. I've lost my period multiple times because of my low body fat percentage. Talk to us about that, because I can imagine, especially with the fluctuations in trying to hit weight, right? So we're trying to cut for weight. We're going through these cycles of like restriction and then coming back to a normal, whatever their nutrition is, which we'll dive into here in a sec. But I'm curious how you approach that conversation, but also how are we kind of working with that individual in hopes that they get it back? Because obviously that's a sign of their health.
For sure. 100%. And how I more or less will go about that is if we notice an increase in overtraining and if we know that athlete's cutting a lot of weight. Like I have a few girls that are cutting, 20-ish pounds over the course of 4 weeks. And like 10 to 12 the night before.
Yeah.
I'm
going to Cancun this weekend, so can you drop that in the chat? Just kidding, guys.
I got you. No, so like when we go through that sharp of an uptick in trying to decrease body fat, we know that there's a whole lot, and not necessarily body fat, but just weight. We know there's so many different things that could put us at a deficit metabolically, and as well as just the symptoms that you're feeling. So how do I go about that? More or less the UFC PI, which I don't know if, have you heard of this Performance Institute, UFC Performance Institute? So the UFC has thrown a bunch of money into this place called the UFC PI. And there's a few of them around the world, but the main headquarters is in Las Vegas, Nevada. They've done a bunch of research. There's actually a handbook. There's 2 handbooks out. There's one, which is a cross-sectional analysis, and the other one, which is it's more or less like a 550-page handbook on how to work with combat athletes. And there's a whole section in there on rehabbing weight loss and trying to rehab weight loss around both male and female combat sports athletes. So they have an entire protocol based around, all right, this person just lost X amount of weight. This is how long they should take to be able to get back and start their cut up again, which more or less, if we're doing that big of a cut of what I was talking about earlier, realistically, that fighter shouldn't be cutting weight again for another 5 to 6 months. Now, is that the reality? No, because these fighters only get paid when they step in the cage. But in an ideal setting, larger cuts, especially on the female side, which typically will impact hormones just a little bit more, because they are dumping into lower body fat percentage. Like I believe the standard for, I'm going to try to quote this, but I have it up next to me. I believe the standard for female athletes when they want to get to is around 16 to 17%. That's what they recommend.
I interrupt this episode to bring you our biggest promo, which is $100 off the Mindset Method group coaching cohort. This cohort is designed to work in a group capacity and work together to understand your relationship with your body, food, and self-worth. More importantly, this is our last cohort in 2024, and you'll be able to work with my Mindset Method coaches on how to not put too much on your plate, both figuratively and literally during the holiday season. In this program, you receive access to the Mindset of Matter app, where you get access to our exclusive Mindset Method curriculum and reflections. On top of that, you receive daily journal prompts to help solidify what you're learning through that curriculum and that reflection of the week. And more importantly, you get time with a coach. You and your cohort will work with your Mindset Method coach to process and understand and get coaching around what you're learning. And that is on a weekly basis. On top of that, and last but not least, you'll get access to the community forum and so many other resources. So if you're ready to go through a holiday season where we do not binge, we don't see weight gain, we don't go into the mindset of starting again on January, check out the show notes below for the link to this offer. Now, back to the show.
Wow.
And that's very low compared to like comparatively to males, where they say it's safe to get down to like 6.5.
Right.
So because of that, and going from X percentage to X percentage, we need to take a little bit more time off, which is what they recommend. We need to add in more carbs is what they recommend, and more proteins is what they recommend post-fight. We need to add in more fish oil and creatine. Almost every female athlete I work with is taking creatine, not just for the healthcare side and for the muscle side, but also for the cognitive benefits.
Right.
And then
Are you
we literally just did.
Yeah. Well, out of curiosity, are you having them do like the standard 5 grams a day, or do you up that? Yeah. Okay.
Well, so it depends, right? So actually, this is a separate topic, but post-fight, actually almost every athlete I work with is on a mega dose of fish oil, mega dose of creatine because of the cognitive benefits. So I'll have them do 2 times the recommended dosage on creatine and 2 times the recommended dosage on fish oil, EPA, DHA. And then from there, that'll allow them to decrease the cognitive inflammation and pull them out of that, I guess, like irritated state.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because they've been knocked in the head a couple times.
Exactly. They got kicked, punched, and grabbed.
Yeah.
I wish I knew this as a college cheerleader, because I've literally been elbowed and like people falling on my head. It's terrible.
Yeah. Are you sure you don't
like, get up?
Are you sure it's ADHD, not CTE at this point?
It might be. I've been concussed, and I literally remember an elbow to the temple. And fell on the ground. And my coach goes, she's fine. And my best friends on the team were like, I don't think she's okay. But because she said that, I'm like, I'll just get up and go right back into a stunt. And this is college. We're not just doing like, little hand, like half, whatever. I don't even know what they're called anymore. You're flying. Is that your cheer? If you guys aren't watching this on YouTube,
I like it, Amanda.
Now.
Thanks.
Yes. 10.
So we're talking about brain inflammation and whatnot post-fight. What types of injuries do you typically see with women who are maybe overtraining or in these combat sports as well?
So I see a lot of disc herniations, both cervical and lumbar. And most of them come from practice. So those are the 2 most common injuries I'll see is radicular symptoms. So like symptoms that radiate from the neck down to the arm. And that'll be from the neck and or into the low back as well. So, and that'll kind of go, a lot of the times lumbar radicular symptoms will go down to the foot or to the back of the knee. But it's more or less just because grappling is the hardest part of combat sports and the hardest part on your body. So focusing on trying to get them away from that overflexed state, over irritated, like lumbar flexion in load when they're not ready for it is dangerous. Now, lumbar flexion itself isn't dangerous, but when you have another body weight on top of you and putting their entire pressure plus all of your body weight on top of it, that's when we can come into problems. And that's where you get to see me in the clinic instead of in the gym, which is no fun for either of us.
Right.
I love that there's an option though, and it's the same person.
Yeah. His setup is beautiful.
Yeah. Cause like, that's what we do in regards to like working on the mindset plus the nutrition and the exercise is the same person who's qualified to do all of those things, which makes the process so seamless and easy. And when we have times where we have an injury or an illness, we can lean into the mindset work as you lean into like the recovery, the mobility, and it's just it's just very seamless. And it, for me and Amanda, I mean, it really just helps with the relationship in general too. So I love that.
Right. Well, and it allows my athletes, like I've noticed it allows my athletes to trust me a little bit more because I'm not like, it's not just coming from you as a coach. Like, I'm also coming at you as a healthcare provider where I'm never going to do something that's ever going to hurt you. And now a good coach never would either. Right. But they know for a fact at the end of the day, I need to do something that is not going to hurt you because that's my duty as a healthcare provider. I'm never going to put you in harm's way. And I've noticed that has gotten me a little bit more goodwill when I'm getting a new athlete to trust me.
Right. Yeah. And we often will tell the client, like, we want them to be the testimonial. Like, we want you to do well. Why wouldn't we like help you in any way that we can? So that way you can achieve what you're looking to achieve. Right. There is no like sabotage. And for you, you're saying the same thing of like, I'm not going to just needle you just because, or cup you just because. Like, I know your goal is to go and get this fight, but we also need to back off the training and take care of our body so that the body can make it to the fight, not just, in an empty skeleton and get injured long-term.
Right. Well, and to go back to the prior question on how do you like the mentality behind being a grinder, right? Like I always tell people I get nothing. So some of my athletes, especially my bigger athletes, I'm paid on percentage. So I get a percentage of their purse. And like yeah. Well, depending on the purse.
Correct.
But I always say, like another saying is, I get nothing if you lose, right? I actually can make less money if you lose. So why would I be telling you to take time off if I don't think that's 100% the right thing for you?
Absolutely.
And I mean, there's a reason why you're paying me money. Let me do my job so you can do your job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, just speaking of like going into a fight and, you're in the training phase, I'd love to just shift over to the nutrition side of things because I know for a lot of the women that come into our community, I'm thinking about a few that I just took on. I mean, they're running every day, they're training every day. It's just this like overtraining mess. And as Amanda's talking about, we'll pull them back, but also increase their calories at the same time. And that is just a mental mindfuck at that point. So I'd love for you to talk about from an athlete's perspective, what that looks like in regards to how much nutrition, or I'm sorry, how many calories and types of things we're doing when we're preparing for a fight.
For sure. So I will say, most of the people I work with, I actually refer out to a dietitian to handle all the nutrition, just because the weight cut is such a big portion. And there's specific dietitians that are trained in weight cut dietetics, so that they can maintain a healthy weight as they go. And that's us again. So anybody on the UFC's roster has access to, I believe, 5 dietitians, for free.
Really?
And so anybody on UFC roster can contact their dietetics department and they will come up with a plan. They'll get them a DEXA scan, and we'll figure out what their actual RMR is and then lay out an entire plan from there. Right. I work with a girl out of Chicago for all of my people not in the UFC named Christina Chu, who's a RD. And that's who I guess refer to. And she handles all of my bigger name athletes because honestly, she's a killer and I know where I'm strong and where I'm weak, and nutrition is not where I'm strong.
So Christina needs to be our next interview.
I 1000% can make that happen.
She's been on your podcast before, hasn't she?
Yeah, we've had her on 4 times.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we'll normally do a roundtable with her, just because she is so sharp, and she was actually at the UFC PI before she branched off and went private practice.
Oh, very cool.
Okay.
I love that.
That being said, I do know, I know enough. I joke with people. I know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Normally the number one thing when fighters are in camp, and especially I've noticed the female fighters that I've worked with, is they try to cut calories way too early.
Oh.
They cut calories and they cut carbs. The earliest I've seen is like 3 weeks before the fight, which is no bueno. And the biggest battle that I get trying to be the boots on the ground, if they are working with Christina or the PI dietitian, is trying to be like, hey, like there's a reason why they made this plan to involve carbs, especially before a high intensity workout. Like carbs are okay. You need to have them. Same with protein, same with fats, right? But carbs in particular right now are very villainized. They've been kind of shit on for a very long time, as of the last like 10 years, just because they're now the new scapegoat. Right. But because of that, the new scapegoat is still a little bit faulty, because we need carbs for high intensity exercise, especially if you can imagine on a sparring day where you're going into a legitimate fight, 3 5-minute rounds with, they might be your friends, but they're in there for a purpose. They're going to try to knock your block off. So you need carbs to be able to perform. And at the end of the day, if I'm a combat athlete, a professional combat athlete, my job is to perform in training sessions and then worry about the weight after. My job is not worry about the weight first and then worry about performance second. And so I have a rule with my athletes now is that I don't do fat camps anymore. Like we need to be in shape once we get into camp, so that we're cutting like a professional and not like an amateur. And that consists of having carbs. That consists of having protein and staying at whatever your dietitian recommends at that calorie count for as long as we need, and not trying to cheat the system because maybe I took 3 weeks off in my camp and I wanted to have a little bit more, or I wanted to be a little bit gluttonous, if you will, which at the end of the day, a cheat meal here and there isn't a bad thing, even to a professional fighter in camp. But when a cheat meal turns into 2 cheat weeks and we have to fight in 5 weeks, that's the problem.
Yeah. Right. I was watching the Netflix series Sprint, which is, with all the Olympic track and field athletes. And they said that. She goes, everyone thinks that we're over here eating this high carb or high protein diet. Because if you look at a sprinter, I mean, they are jacked. I'm obsessed with their bodies. But she's like, nope, it's all high carb. She says that on there. And I'm like, I need that little cut for or the clip for Instagram, so I can tell these women it's okay to eat carbs. Now, we work with a lot of different women who have a variety of different, they're in different places in their lives. So for those of you listening, yes, like for women in the perimenopause cycle, a menopause cycle, we're looking at their carb load and what their bodies can handle. But again, carbs are not, we will never be the people that completely cut carbs, which a lot of programs will do, because we're also, training them in, strength type of resistance training where we're doing low reps, high weight, and we really want them to get the most out of it. But everyone listen, carbs are not the enemy.
Well, and there's something else Austin said that I wanted to reference for our clients too, is he was talking about the weight loss versus the performance, and he needs the performance to be achieved, and the weight loss we can figure that out later. But if you can't perform, then we don't need to cut the weight. And what I'm hearing for that, for our clients, is we need the mindset to be settled, because the weight's not going to solve the mindset piece of this. And so, I mean, think of two birds of a different flock, but they're still birds, right? Whatever that saying is, meaning these athletes have to meet certain criteria to hit their cut, right? If you had the cheat weeks and you weren't training and you were dicking around, then maybe we need to reschedule this fight or really consider what it is realistically going into it. And same thing with our clients. If you've been dicking around, not tracking and not hitting your workouts, and then think that the cut real quick is going to solve all of this, negative ill will.
I call it their security blanket.
Yeah.
They use a cut as a security blanket.
Then we're really not setting you up for long-term adequacy or performance or adequate outcomes, right? And so it's the same thing of we all have these standards that need to be met. And this is where weight loss is different than what us three do. Is look, you've been on a diet forever. Great. But in order to achieve a successful diet where you're not on a diet forever, or perpetually in a weight loss phase to be meeting all these targets for your fight, we've got to pull back, regain, resettle, then go into it. It's not this perpetual fighting, we're setting up a fight every 3 months where you're cutting. You're talking about 5 to 6 months minimum in between fights as well, where we're talking about with our clients too. We might take 5 months off of a weight loss phase just to let you hang out for the summer and enjoy it without being in a diet for once in your life.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and just creating foundations is what we're all doing ultimately with our clients.
Exactly. And something else, like, again, I don't remember who said this, but I heard it along the line of a lot of it's not that we're over fat, we're under muscled. And the same can be applied to MMA fighters, right?
I interrupt this episode to bring you our August promo, which is $1 for 1 month of the Mindset and Movement fitness training app. This app has been designed for anyone, whether you're a beginner, advanced, whether you have access to a full gym, or maybe you have dumbbells at home, or maybe you only have 20 minutes and you want to get a great workout in. If this is you, this app has been designed for you. The app includes 4-phase training programs. We have a 5-day split for someone who has access to a full gym. We have a 5-day split if someone has access to dumbbells. We have a 3-day body weight and band split if you want to start there. We have a 3-day time crunch dumbbell workout split if you're short on time. And we have core programs that you can add to any of the other programs. The nice thing about this app is that every month the workout change. The workouts are going to be designed based on the previous workout, so they're well phased so that you get the results that you desire. You also get access to our community forum of like-minded individuals to share your experience and share your workouts and your success. You'll also get access to a variety of resources that the Mindset of Matter includes in this program. So if you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, click the link below to get $1 for 1 month. And here's the great thing. After the first month, it's $29 per month. So you'll definitely want to partake in this. Now, back to the show.
Because just because you look really shredded when you cut all that weight doesn't mean our fat-free muscle is any bigger or where it actually should be. A lot of fighters actually aren't as strong as people think. They just know how to use their body in a combat sports setting. But in the weight room, they're not very strong, right? And if I can get them a little bit stronger, if I can add a little bit more muscle on top, well, from the weight cutting side of things, we know muscle has more water in it. So we could actually, like that last cut where they're draining the water out of their body, we actually get more out of the last cut if we make them more muscular. And then the second thing, if we increase muscle, it increases our RMR for the most part. So
we explain RMR to
resting resting metabolic rate.
We know what that means.
So your RMR is how many calories do you burn throughout a day, basically doing nothing, right? And for more muscle, the more muscle you have, the higher RMR goes because muscle needs more energy to function. So if I can
see, guys, we were being honest.
Exactly.
We weren't lying.
But if I can add more muscle, it's such a hard thing
for people to understand. Yeah.
And if I can add more muscle, then it takes me 4 to 5 months in that rebuilding phase. That allows me or them, realistically, but me, because I'm the one helping them along the way and I have to hear about it the whole time, that allows them to actually have an easier cut as it goes because they have more water and they're burning more calories from the start of the camp.
Yep.
Awesome.
Ding, ding, ding. I love it. I want to go into more of, the mindset piece. And I don't know if you guys touch on this, but I want to open this can up of, these women who are in combat sports. We're doing the cuts. Now, we've worked with many women who have been physique athletes and now are coming to us because their relationship with their body and food is a disaster. Okay. They have, cut, refed, done this whole binge restrict cycle over and over again, depending on how many times they've competed. I'm curious to, your experience with the mental side of cutting, gaining. What do you see from your own athletes mentally? Obviously, that would be addressed by someone like myself, like a therapist or someone who specializes in this.
So this is another one of the things that anybody in the UFC is very lucky. They have 2 therapists on staff at the UFCPI that you have a mental performance specialist that you can work with for free.
I'm leaving. Leaving the Mindset of Matter. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just kidding.
That being said, we have had one of the UFCPI, and then also one of my really good buddies down here is he was actually the mental performance therapist for the Nike Oregon project for 10 years, I believe. So being able to talk to them and understand where they come from, a lot of the fighters, especially around weight cutting, that's the hardest thing for them to I guess, address as they're leaving the sport. It's really, really hard while you're in the sport, but understanding that that's not safe, effective, or even healthy once you're getting out of the sport and starting the retirement process and getting into just normal life. I call it NARP life, non-athletic regular person life. That's the biggest hurdle. And it's almost like an exit strategy or like an exit meeting needs to be had to show them that this whole binge and purge, which every combat athlete is, myself included. Like I've wrestled since I was 6. I've cut a lot of weight in my life and I never did it correctly. And that was the hardest thing for me to get over, was understanding that you can't just not eat to lose weight. Like that's not sustainable. Just because I did that when I was a college athlete and was burning a whole lot of calories and I was doing it for the performance side of things. Now we're into that longevity phase of life. We're into the phase of life where you want to make your body work as well as it can, as long as it can, not just at a maximal intensity for a very short amount of time.
Right.
And getting them the information of the way you've been trained since you were probably a young child isn't necessarily the way you should be training your body in this next phase of life is one of the hardest conversations, but one of the most gratifying conversations because you can really make big differences.
Right. No, I agree. It's especially with athletes, because I'm thinking about, like I had mentioned, I have a few clients who are ex-college athletes, and it just, even in their 30s and 40s, they're still struggling with this mindset. Because as you mentioned, like it wasn't just college, it was everything up to that point that got them there. We have one coach who's worked with professional athletes as well. So we're beyond the college point. And the majority of our life, we've been trained this way, to whether it's cut or training in general, their exercise routine. I know for me, like I said, I've been dancing my whole life. I was in dance every single day for 4 to 5 hours, like except for like Sunday. And apparently now they have Sunday practices for kids. They don't even get a day off. So, for them to hear that, we have to think about this and make that shift from performance and sport to longevity is so important. And that's a shift I've personally made in myself, because it was always cut for the photo shoot, cut for, whatever it was that was coming up. And now I'm just like, no, I'm 41. I want to, be able to walk and lift and do all the things when I'm, 81, and making that shift. It's almost actually been really freeing for me, but I know for a lot of the women we deal with, it is a challenge, because again, they just can't get out of that I'm an athlete mindset. So I'm glad you're able to touch on that.
Well, and I guess like actionable steps on how do we get them there, right? The biggest thing I've had outside of just the conversation is I've found a lot of people programming in rest days, and actually, again, like putting that into the program is what allows them to start to get that flip switched. So like I use 3 different apps, but the one that most of my athletes are on currently is called True Coach. And that's what we use for that programming. And you can either leave a day blank, or you can actually click the little battery button and put a rest day in there. And my athletes that are transitioning from being a pro to moving towards like, hey, I might have been a pro, but now I'm a 36-year-old ex-MMA fighter who wants to be a dad and be healthy, or be a mom and be healthy. That's where I really like my actual, like my in-person pro athletes. I don't always put rest day in there, right? Because they know they're supposed to do that. But if I give them the rest day and I put like specific guidelines of, no, this is full rest, enjoy your kid, relax, have a breather, right? And they start to realize that they don't have to constantly push, which is the hard part. They all think they constantly have to push because that's what got them to be great. Because everybody wants to be great. There's just different ways to be great, right? But being great in this next phase of life comes from adding in rest days, comes from being more balanced, comes from eating correctly and not just trying to consistently lose weight and then put back on 20 pounds, right? And that rest day is the first step I've found to start that cascade of, this is how I need to start acting and treating my body and that allows them to spend more time with their family, which is what most athletes want to do as soon as they're done, is get the time back that they lost.
That's literally the first thing we do is pull back on their training. My whole concept is called finding your minimums or your floor. Like, let's find out what the minimum is you can do to still get the results that you desire. Because if we start where you're at, I've got nowhere to go. So I want to pull you back and see how your body responds. And 100% of the time, their body responds brilliantly. It's though, again, just talking them into that. And that concept of, well, if I start where you're at now and you're not seeing results now, then I have nowhere to go because you're at your ceiling. So let's bring you back down to the floor and slowly make your way, and most of the time we don't even increase.
Yeah.
Maybe we do 3 days, full body strength training, walking on days off, mobility on days off, maybe some, pelvic floor work, whatever. And that's it. And they get amazing results. So,
well, and the other thing that I've also noticed with that specific type of client, going from high performance physically towards and as a professional athlete to, all right, now I'm living the rest of my life, is that they don't always understand that recovery days are needed to, I guess, recover from the stimulus. Everybody thinks that the only way to get better is to continually do things, but it's actually more important because you need to recover from putting yourself at a deficit. Working out just puts you at a deficit, but everybody focuses on the working out side and nobody ever focuses on the, hey, we need to also fill in that hole we just dug and turn it into a mound or to a mountain, not just continually keep digging that hole. And that's a good conversation, I guess, to have as well in my line of work, is because you need that athlete to understand, or I guess really comprehend where they're going and how we get to the next step. Because if they don't understand why it's in the program, they're not gonna do it. They know one speed and it's go. So if they don't understand, and if they don't understand why they're doing it, then they're just not gonna listen.
I have a question, because you touched a little bit on this on the after part with females and your male athletes of wanting to regain their time and spending it with their family.
Yep.
When we go back to the ones that are like currently in the midst of working with you, how do you talk about like balance? Obviously their career and their job is I don't want to say working out, but like the combat sport. So it looks different than someone who's going to work as a nurse or a doctor or someone like that. But like, you're talking about rest and recovery, right? And there is an important mindset piece that comes with getting social with people and not just focusing on, these are my strict calories, this is my strict training schedule. But at some point, there is a strict calorie and strict training schedule to meet this, weight or this combat goal. So how do you discuss like the balancing of all of these different buckets, as we like to refer to them to, for these people?
So that is a hot button topic in combat sports.
Good job.
Go into it.
So my personal opinion and what I kind of tell my athletes is there's a difference between being in camp and being out of camp. The same way when it comes from nutrition, same way it comes from exercise programming.
Can you say what camp is specifically?
Yes, sorry, my bad.
That's okay.
In fight camp. So fight camp is typically anywhere between, at the very longest, 12 weeks, but typically it's between 8 weeks to 4 weeks.
Okay.
And that's when they are training, because a normal MMA schedule, you're practicing one, maybe twice a day. And you're doing that five to 6 days a week. And we're trying to do it in like the high-low method, like Charlie Francis high-low method, where we're going like high intensity, low intensity, high intensity, low intensity, just to vary the stimulus. Once we get in camp, typically volume, while it shouldn't, typically volume starts to increase because all the coaches want to start adding more technique or adding more technical practices and stuff like that. And so this all is a long way of kind of getting to when we're out of camp and we're focused more on becoming a better athlete. That's where I tell my athlete to prioritize spending time with their family. That's where I tell my athlete, like, you need to build into your schedule what you're doing with your family. Actually put it in there and have set times that you can actually recharge. The unfortunate thing is, in most of my athletes, when they get into camp, MMA is a very selfish game. And the downside of being a high level athlete is that you need to be selfish with your time. And in order for them to perform at the highest level, sometimes you aren't able to get home until 8:30 p.m. Sometimes you aren't able to have that family meal. And you just know that for those 8 weeks, like there's a guy named Max Holloway. If he was the 145-pound champ, at featherweight champ, he says he stamps his passport to Crazy Town when he gets into camp. That's his like saying. And when he's in Crazy Town, the only thing that matters is that date. When we're out of camp, he's the best dad in the world. He spends as much time with his family and his kids. But when I stamp that passport to Crazy Town, it is, I have a goal and nothing is going to get in my way with that goal. And that is how I've found my athletes to be the most successful and have the best balance possible. Because if you're always on, if all you focus on is MMA, then you have no balance with family.
Right.
If you don't give that selfish time of in camp, then you are leaving some performance on the table from what I've seen.
Well, I think too, just, so my background is as a marriage and family therapist. So I look at like systems theories, and even just knowing the mental and physical exhaustion what it sounds like camp is like, there does have to be boundaries with your children, because unfortunately, we're probably not going to be showing up in a way that we prefer. So even having those, and I'm just thinking, my brain goes there because that's how it's, how I think. So, even just having those boundaries so that I'm not doing anything because my emotional boundaries are down because I'm so physically and mentally exhausted, that is going to, impair this relationship with my family. So even just like having that understanding, I think of just even people who travel for work, there's trying to make up for that time when we can. And when we're in this mindset and this, camp, we are having really strong boundaries. So we keep everyone safe, not just ourselves,
Right.
So that's where my brain goes, of course.
100%. And it kind of comes down to the same thing I was talking about earlier, where high performance isn't healthy. And I was talking about it physically. High performance isn't always healthy. Well, it almost exclusively isn't healthy mentally. Like it's typically something that takes away from every other part of your life. And kind of, even though the answer I gave wasn't necessarily like, it wasn't necessarily like the most PC answer. It's not what people want to hear. That is at the end of the day, what every professional athlete I've worked with in any sport kind of comes down to is, this is how I make my money. This is how I chose to be great. And there's certain sacrifices that come along with that. And unfortunately, when I'm in this phase of the year, this is what the sacrifice has to be. And I'm going to do everything in my power to then make up for that in the other phases of my year.
Do you find that, sorry, Christina, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was wondering, do you find that female athletes have a harder time like setting that boundary than males? Just because I feel like it's a male dominated sport. Obviously, like females are becoming more prevalent in it, which is wonderful. But typically the female role is the housewife or girlfriend. You're going to have kids and all this. And now they're going into this male dominated sport, having to be selfish, having to set these boundaries. And I don't think everybody can understand that it can work both ways, between male and female.
Well, and a lot of this comes from just having a conversation with your partner, having a conversation with your family, and just sitting down and saying, this is what I have to do. This is where we're coming. Like, this is how we get the extra paycheck. This is how we get what we need for the family to survive. Right. To answer your question, yes, I have found that the female athletes that I work with do have a little bit harder time. But is it because they have a harder time because they put the pressure on themselves, or is it because they have a harder time because the pressure is put on them by their partner? Right. And I personally, so I haven't worked with any athletes that are moms. All of the female, all the female athletes, all the female athletes I've worked with they've been in relationships, but they haven't had a kid yet. So that is something I haven't experienced, but I have heard from my buddies that do strength conditioning for female athletes in combat sports around the country that have worked with athletes. That's the number one thing, is getting their family and specifically their husband on board with, hey, look, this is what, just because she's supposed to be the housewife or she's supposed to be the person at home, that unfortunately for that guy, that sucks. But guess what? it's not about you. It's about fucking her.
Right.
And she's trying to be great in her way. And her way is to step into the cage, absolutely dominate somebody else, and bring home 2 paychecks. So what you have to do is be a good partner, be supportive, and you need to pick up the slack at home while she's in that passport to crazy town. So it's that conversation of, these are the clear expectations. And if you have that at the beginning, typically things get better. But when you're not talking, that's the problem.
Right. Now, this is so brilliant. And, just coming back to everything you've just discussed and, making this, creating the example for our own clients, there is not this understanding, because a lot of hype out there is, eat whatever, lose weight. Like, a lot of these people are, even if it fits your macros, like that was something that's like, just, you can have the Oreos and all the things all day long. And people really, they lost weight, of course, but they didn't realize what was going into their bodies. And, what I see with our clients is that they don't realize, especially in a fat loss phase, if we're specifically in a fat loss phase, the word you use is the sacrifice, the things that you do have to actually compromise on and set boundaries with, and also talk to your people, right? If you're in a relationship, talk to your partner. This is going to look a little bit different. When our clients have communication with their support around them, around their goals, and again, it doesn't always just have to be fat loss. It could be, like for me, the longevity piece. Like, we've had to change our meals because I'm looking at cutting out, inflammatory foods from my diet. And that looked a lot different than some of the faster meals that we would make just for convenience, right? It looks a lot different than that. So we had that conversation, and now it makes my life a lot easier because he's now making those adjustments too, or whatever. But it's the same with any sort of goal, right? But in our case, the goal of changing your relationship with your body, food, your self-worth. Obviously, at a fat loss phase, that compromise and sacrifice is so important, and that communication and support is so important. So we can definitely see how these worlds, they bleed into each other. So I'm glad you were able to discuss that.
Well, even so, I can piggyback on that too, is like the whole pregnancy stuff with Michael and I. And so when Austin's talking about even the athletes coming out of being a professional athlete and becoming a normal person, of that conversation of what does our home life dynamic look like? If, say, the husband was always cooking and taking care of the kids, and now I'm kind of back in the picture, how do we share that? Where like Michael and I was the one that was primarily doing the grocery shopping, the cooking, the planning of the meals and all that. And then when the pregnancy came out, I was like, I can't take any of that. Like, for food is just disgusting, first of all. And I need you to just kind of decide I need you to make the executive decision. Right. Yep. So even I think thinking of these micro practices throughout life. So, and you're finding them, and I'm hearing them with Austin's experience working with the combat athletes, of these situations that are happening that are rather large are great practice for our longevity standpoint. So realizing this cut diet cycle isn't always the best option, but we can do it right now. But long-term, I'm aware that that's not the best opportunity for my body and life. Realizing I'm having these conversations with my husband may be really challenging, but like my job is to be a combat athlete. It opens up the door to have more conversations when I re-enter life as a normal person. And even like, and looking at longevity of, okay, what does our nutrition as a family look like when we're looking at this long-term perspective? And so I did want to point that out, of like, there's, again, different kind of sayings and things, but there's a similarity here between the people that we all work with.
Oh yeah.
Are just, they're just in different phases of life or in different professions, but there's a lot of commonalities. Yeah.
Well, I work mostly with athletes, right? But I work with sports wellness. I say I work with high performers, right? I work with executives, and I have a couple female executives that I've worked with, and it was even harder for them to get the other person. Like, they're running meetings, they're kicking ass in the boardroom, but that's the hardest people to get their partners on board with. Like, hey, like, they want to be great in their way, and they have an opportunity to do that. If you truly love somebody, you want to be that as supportive of a partner as possible. You got to pick up the slack when they might have this thing that they need to get done that night. You might be the one making dinner. Oh man, learn how to freaking cook. Oh, no.
Right.
like my wife, I absolutely love cooking, but my wife's pregnant right now, right? I'll cook more because she just doesn't feel great some nights. That's just part of being in a relationship, and also being a give and take if your partner is also a high performer, which I would argue almost everybody on earth wants to be considered a high performer.
But it sounds like, I mean, that's our clients, that high achiever. That we have, one of our best episodes is on toxic resilience, right? This idea that I can just keep doing and keep doing and keep doing. That's the hustle and the grind mentality that will end up, our bodies will end up breaking down both mentally and physically, because we're not asking for help. Because I mean, I work with colon rectal surgeons, I work with hand surgeons, I work with OBGYNs, and they are afraid to ask for help from their own colleagues, let alone their partners, because their colleagues, they don't want to look, incompetent, like their words, I'm a failure. Like, these are real struggles in their minds. And so we create a space to allow to work on, obviously, the mindset of that, but then also create those more sustainable habits that are not that toxic resilience, that are actually true resilience. So it's a tough, I mean, in the athlete minds and that high achiever, I mean, they're
the exact same. They're the exact same. Yeah.
The same.
That's why I originally was never going to work with non-athletes. That was something that I was very, very sure of. And I got into business. The first 50 patients weren't anything but athletes. And then I got my first guy he was a CEO of a company. And I'm like, oh, he actually listens to me? Because my experience when I was in clinic was like, anybody that wasn't an athlete didn't care about rehab. They didn't listen. They didn't do the exercise I asked them to do, and they just didn't want to get better. Now, could I have been better at my delivery? I was a student, 1,000%. But it frustrated me, because if I'm going to give you 100% effort, I expect 100% effort back. And that was that first patient. I was like, oh, people that are paying their hard-earned money, because I am a cash practice, people that are going to pay me cash to get better, they're going to do what I ask them to do. And that's kind of how it spiraled in. And that's when I started to realize, like, oh, high performers are high performers. They all have the same type of mentality, and all of them want to go from good to great. And the best way for me to get them to go from good to great is for them to understand that it's not all about toxic resiliency. It's not all about more. It's about better. And I guess, like, to bring it full circle, because I believe the first question you kind of asked me was, hey, how do I program certain things? Is I'm big on goals, right? I don't think they're the end all be all, but if I know where the boat wants to get to, I can help them drive it there. And as soon as I know where they want to get to, then I'm going to try to lay out the best plan possible to help them row the boat towards that goal. And whether that's writing the program in pencil, not pen, and being able to modify day to day, whether that's telling them and helping them talk through a conversation, like some of the stuff I've done with my female athletes, I've literally sat there and they kind of like spitballed with me and like, hey, how do I bring this up to my boyfriend? How do I bring this up to my husband? That I need more time. I need to be in the gym that extra session. And it's not about them. It's about me right now. Because that's the hardest conversation to have. Is the unfortunate thing about being a pro athlete is it's okay to be selfish, because you have to be to accomplish your goals. Now, that doesn't mean be selfish all the time, but if I don't know anybody that's accomplished the top level of what they do without being a little selfish here and there. It just has to be in phases. And sitting down and game planning with them how to have that conversation. But all of it comes from having the goal where they want to get to, truly understanding that it's not my goal, it's their goal. And then giving them steps along the way, whether it's from the physical side, the healthcare side, the mental side, and allowing them to step, row towards that goal as efficiently as we can.
I love that. I mean, even being the founder of the Mindset of Matter and growing this organization, I think of something Amanda said, her mom said, like, she must fucking think about this business every day, was what her mom told her. And it's true. Every day, in the morning, at night, I'm thinking about it. My husband, as I mentioned, does the cooking. But I also have this second second mind, if you will, that is, okay, it's not a tit for tat by any means, but okay, he needs something, whether it's his clothes are in the, we don't do each other's laundry. I do mine. He does.
Me and Lisa do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Same. Yeah. But if I see like, he's
that say more
busy,
about us
like,
or more about them?
right. Yeah. It's, if I see that he's busy, like my brain's like, okay, now this is where you make up for the amount of, responsibility he's taken off of my plate. Like, how can I start to, just give back in those little tiny ways every single day? Maybe not every day, but as much as I can. Yep. Because, right now we're in a really good place, but there's been months and months where it's just been bell to bell, as they say, with work. Yep. and creating processes and training people and coaching. And so it's also that it doesn't have to be, for the women that are listening who aren't the athlete, I mean, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can kind of sprinkle these little things in to create that balance as well, because I do that. And I make it selfish to an extent, but then try to, give as much as I can from the 100% I have every day, because that's all we have. We don't have 100% in our relationship. We don't have 100% in our business. We only have fucking 100%. Yep. And when 95 is going to this business, 5% needs to go back to myself and my relationship. So I definitely feel that.
I joke about that. Like it's like a pizza. You only have 8 slices, right? And if 6 of those slices are going towards the business, or when I use this for my athletes, if 6 of those slices go towards cueing the athlete, they only have 2 slices to then go accomplish the task at hand, right? If 6 of my slices is going towards warrior sports wellness and building a fighter, I only got 2 slices to give to Lisa. Yeah. Now, I can't do that every day, right? I need to be able to dial it back and not eat so many slices at the beginning of my day. But it needs to be a give and a take. And it's not just give or take. It's a paradigm along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. Love. Amanda, I do have a separate question. It's kind of a random question. I work with some teenagers who struggle with their own body image. They're athletes. They're both actually in cheer. And, the one that I'm thinking of, she's trying to go into collegiate cheer. She has had an ankle injury, had surgery, and it was a lot of just education because, just learning like total daily energy expenditure, how we actually lose and gain weight, how proteins, fats, and carbs, just very basic. And it's been beautiful to see her transformation. But what are some things that your younger athlete, do you work with younger athletes?
Yeah, I'll work as young as 14.
Okay. What are some things that if they're listening, because I want to send this to her, what are some pointers to help her to, in her case, she was really trying to eat less, move more, that same mentality. What are some takeaways for the young athletes listening that you would share so that I can send this to her?
I am going to be as cliche as possible, but
I love cliches.
The number one thing I tell I think I've worked with 25 female wrestlers, which you can imagine is kind of, and 20, like high school female wrestlers, which that's just a absolute shit show of up and down and up and down and up and down and standards is what's on the scale doesn't matter. Day to day doesn't matter, right? It's how you feel and how you perform during your practices. That is what matters. And just because you're not at the professional level yet doesn't mean that's not a goal of yours and doesn't mean you shouldn't treat your body like that. So prioritizing nutrition should be number one. Prioritizing having enough calories, actually eating protein and actually eating carbs. Those are 2 of the biggest things with my youth female athletes I've worked with. And then outside of that, it's again, another cliche, but it's your journey, not somebody else's. Just I've found it a lot with athletes that have high performing family members. I have a few where there's male or female, their uncle or their cousin or their brother or sister are number 1 in the country. And they're like they're like 25. They're still really damn good. but
Right.
but they start to take the other person's journey and they start to realize they're not there yet. And that's when the cheating starts to come in. That's when I'm going to cut out the calories. That's when I'm going to try to accelerate the process because they see somebody else being successful faster than them. But it's one of those things that you can't rush greatness, and you can't rush everybody's, I guess, level of greatness is different, and you get to that level at different points in your life. If I was a good athlete, I was a good wrestler, I did some cool stuff, but I would say I wasn't great as an athlete. My greatness I'm to the point now where I know I'm great at what I do, and it's because of who I can impact and the feeling that I get when I get to do a really good job. And if I tried to rush that, and if I would have spent more time trying to push something that wasn't going to happen, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. I'd still be I'd still be on the Olympic ladder trying to get to a certain level of wrestling when I found my journey later. So the big thing, I guess, for youth athletes is like, just if something doesn't feel right now, that doesn't mean it's not going to feel right forever. And B, that doesn't mean that you can't be great in 2, 3, 4 years. Just because you see somebody that's at the 15-year-old level doing something you want doesn't mean that they're also going to be at that same exact level when they're 19, 20, 21.
Right. Well, and this particular client's case, it's the body image of, her friends are the flyers and they're small, and I can understand that. Amanda and I talk about it. I mean, I was a base because I was a dancer. I had thick ass legs and my friends look different than me, I couldn't throw them in the air if they were my size, but it's that, not comparing to everyone else and making it her own journey. And she's made amazing, amazing progress. But I know that she's now looking at this, okay, I'm good here. Now going into the collegiate level of cheerleading, we have a whole new slew of struggles that she's going to, that may or may not come her way. Hopefully we've created a foundation that she can kind of fight against them. But I appreciate that.
Sure. I guess the other cliche is high performance doesn't have a shape. It only has performance. And
the Olympics showed us that.
That's the Olympics taught us anything this year. It's holy balls. There is a wide plethora of body types that can achieve greatness.
100%. So if you try to force yourself into somebody else's shape, it ain't gonna work. You got to fit your shape.
No, I love that. The Olympics were so good for that.
100%.
Awesome. Yeah. Anything else?
No, I think, Austin, you speak very eloquently, and I think you did a great job of what we were looking for to get today.
I appreciate it. I was a little bit period heavy at the beginning. I'm sorry, but I had this whole
period heavy piece.
Yeah, I had this whole cheat sheet open of inflammation in the early mid follicular level requires more recovery. I have the PI book right next to me. I'm ready. So
okay, well, we'll bring you back on for that. Gotcha. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes.
So on Instagram at Building a Fighter, on TikTok at Building a Fighter, on YouTube at Building a Fighter. The only one that's different is X. There you can't have that many letters, so it's Building a Fighter.
Building.
Building a Fighter basically across the board, and then in person in Wisconsin at Warrior Sports Wellness.
Love it.
Facility.
Perfect.
I would definitely recommend.
Well, you guys definitely check all of those links out. Thank you so much for coming on. If you guys enjoyed this information or you feel that this would be helpful for others, please share this podcast, rate, review, and subscribe. If you want more information on the Mindset of Matter, you'll find us on Instagram at Mindset of Matter Coaching. You'll find this recording on YouTube at The Mindset of Matter. You'll find Coach Amanda at fitbyamanda.az. Did I get?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
Said that 70,000 times and I forgot. And please check out the show notes for our promos for the month of August. And if you honestly have not been listening this entire time and want to walk away with one thing, we want you to remember this.
What you say in the mind,
you see in the mirror. Bye-bye.
Bye.